Please welcome Congresswoman Niki Tsongas.
Thank you all. As we are focused so much in Washington about how best to create jobs in this country, one of the things that we continually to come back to is how best to make it in America. What do we need to do to support the our manufacturing base? Our national conversation has been dominated by the idea that we don't need to make things here in America anymore, that we can invent things here, but let our global competitors make them overseas. What I hope to learn today from all of you and intend to take back to Washington is how we can nurture American manufacturing, how we can do a better job of training and retraining to meet the high-tech needs of employers, and how we can ensure that good jobs are available at every skill level.
How much of the world's manufacturing output, percentage-wise, do you think is done in the United States? Somebody give me a number. 2%? 9%. How about the other way? How much do you think of the world's total manufacturing output is done in China? 60. 70. You're all flunking. Right now, the U.S. is still a major manufacturing power in the world. We produce nearly 20% of the total manufactured goods in the world. China produces 19.8%. So we're virtually in a dead heat. Now, the important thing is here, I think, to speak about what's left and how have these firms survived. These firms have survived because they're working smarter. They're working with a lot of computer equipment. They have incredibly high rates of productivity for the people who are being employed. We're never going to get back the factories that were building machinery that employed 8, 10, 12,000 people in one particular environment. Those days, I think, around here are over. But the days of having incredibly smart workers working with highly sophisticated technologies, that predominates in the valley. The average age right now in the Merrimack Valley of a machinist, a precision metal worker, is somewhere between 64 and 68, depending on the data that you look at. That's a real problem. Technical high schools are incredibly important to that base of skill and the development of and the reproduction of those highly skilled workers. And unfortunately around here, because people think there is no manufacturing, fewer and fewer kids are going into those programs. The funds for those programs at too many schools are being cut.
Your data really is supporting what I've been seeing over and over and over again as I've been traveling the Fifth. And always a remarkable need to innovate, whether it's around lean manufacturing and constantly revisiting in order to control costs, or whether it's just the nature of the product in a more discrete way. But that capacity to innovate and the role of education is critically important. So many companies are here because of UMass Lowell, because of the community colleges, and it sounds to me like the technical schools have a very important role to play. If you look at why we lost so much manufacturing, is it simply lower wages? Is it simply it's a subsidization of other countries around what they see the opportunities are? What is at the impact of globalization, really? How has that fueled this sort of migration of jobs to the kind of areas that Bob has talked about?
It's especially interesting talking about this in the city of Lawrence. Roughly 100, 110, 120 years ago, Lawrence, as a geographic space, was the most productive area in the world per acre. The wealth created here was astonishing. Fast forward to globalization. Why globalization? Well, you have a couple factors. One, that are technological. One is the giant container freighters, right? That over the past 20, 30 years have reduced the cost of transport by water unbelievably. Right? And when firms make business location decisions, right, the transportation costs are a major concern. There are other concerns, proximity to a skilled labor force, proximity to markets, etc. But transportation costs, you know, through the late 20th century, trended higher in the determination of where to locate, and labor costs actually trended lower. All right, you throw in transportation costs, basically corporations could become footloose and fancy-free. They locate, they can spread their operations out internationally. They'll locate, you know, marketing department in one place, production in another place, and it's all knitted together with communication. I have a friend who is actually a shoe designer. He tried to start a company 4 or 5 years ago, and he went to China, and it ended up being just a disaster, and lost control of the company. He's costing out doing it now, and he's going to make it. He's going to make his product that he's designed in the United States. And he said his average per shoe is about $3 less per shoe now than it would cost to make it in China, and he will have a lot more control over it. So he claims things are changing. You know, China may be moving into this sort of mid-level development, which is a tough transition to make from a low-level development, and there may be opportunities here.
I think that the jobs that left are jobs that became, for lack of any better term, mass-produced, produced in massively high volumes. Think of like Gillette razor blades, or, you know, as the best example, things that once they've become standardized can be done fairly quickly, fairly easily with a technology that can be moved any place. And the jobs that are here, even, and I shouldn't say even, including the ones that we've just heard about, are jobs that require back and forth between design, manufacturing, design then for manufacturing, production, direct relationships with customers, and those things become much more problematic to sort of shift out into a vast global scene.
We have a ownership that has a commitment to U.S. manufacturing, and as a result, everybody in the company focuses on doing it successfully. Now, is it easy? No. The average wage in Asia, in China, has increased dramatically from about 50 cents 10 years ago to almost $1.30, $1.40 today. But shoes can be made in Vietnam, and there the wage is still in the 50-cent range. So our average wage is $15 of direct labor, and our benefits are 84% on top of it. What can everybody do to help U.S. manufacturing and build jobs other than rah-rah? Well, one is medical insurance and medical healthcare costs. We're budgeting almost $12,000 next year for that. That's only 75%.
Per employee.
Per employee.
Currently, 60 to 65% of the product is still made here in Lawrence, Massachusetts. But really what's driven where the product is manufactured is where our customers are going to be cutting and sewing garments, because we're a business-to-business company, and New Balance is a business-to-consumer company, so you kind of control the distribution of where your product will go. Where we, you know, if we want to do the business, we have to manufacture it within reasonable proximity to where people cut and sew garments. What we compete on is innovation. You know, we're still a company that actually employs textile engineers. Not many companies do that. And what it's allowed us to do is to maintain a premium selling price. It's allowed us, you know, to basically be competitive in the market. The Barry Amendment for Polartec is vitally important. Polartec has, well, we have, if you think about the brands that we sell into, like the North Face, Patagonias, LL Beans, those type of companies, another major segment that we developed about 20 years ago was the military segment. And the military segment's about, if we're a $250 million company, it's about $50 million a year of our business. The Barry Amendment for us basically does apply, and it actually applies even to our critical suppliers who provide yarn, which is kind of the building block of Polartec. So basically, Polartec is made from this yarn, and the Barry Amendment is basically yarn for it. And it's very important for our suppliers, and if our supplier wasn't healthy, then we wouldn't be healthy.
Do you think we're doing enough in the area of workforce and training, and how, if you're in that field, do you keep up with the ever-evolving demand for ever-changing skill set?
Each community college has an entity that is called either corporate education, community education, workforce development, something along those lines. As part of the community college mission, years ago, Middlesex just celebrated its 41st anniversary. The college made a real concerted effort to make sure that as a part of their mission of open access to education and training for individuals, that there's also open access to education and training for employers. So I think that's one way in which certainly the community colleges are trying to support industries, trying to support manufacturing. The community colleges are pretty nimble. We're very flexible in that we can, come into a company, have a conversation with an employer, and try to develop a program that fits their need. We work very closely with the workforce investment boards and with career services from labor and economic development, like Corcoran in particular. We work very closely in writing workforce training funds for companies in our service area. All of the community colleges do that. They have grant writers, and we partner with companies and become part of the team. Companies, I think, know that part of the community college mission is to help support them in that effort. Then I think that we can really be an integral part to help you advance your company forward.
In terms of each company made a decision. I believe it was the founding fathers or the founding moms, but a decision was made at one point in time to say, we have a commitment to, without sounding too flowery here, we have a commitment to America. And I guess my question is, how do you convince other companies to have that same commitment?
Well, unless you have somebody with passion and like that, I don't think those kind of decisions are going to get. If you got a committee, it's not going to happen. So
It's a tough one. I mean, the Apple jobs, right? Designed in Cupertino, but manufactured, God knows where, right? Polartec, we're all really proud. I mean, I tell people that we're basically manufacturing 60% of the product, and we kind of stick our head out, and we really are proud. But at the end of the day, it's the customers that are driving where we manufacture the product.
I hate to say this, but I'm not sure it's the right question. I think the process of internationalization of markets is one that is not going to be turned around by well-meaning people who want to maintain. I think I'm an economist. I hate to. Not that we're cynical or anything, but the profit motive it's unbelievably powerful, and even national sentiments pale. I think what we need to do is learn how we've been protected for a long time. We have to learn how to be competitive in that market so that companies will want to produce here.
One sure way to keep manufacturing jobs in the U.S. is to make sure that there are small businesses. We simply don't have the resources to go offshore. And so, the other thing that works that way is in niche markets, it's going to stay here. If we can get better at taking research from our universities and keeping it here and creating production jobs, that's a good niche. It's not venture capital type technology, but there are plenty of niche businesses that can stay right here and flourish in the Merrimack Valley.
You need to assess your workforce. You need to get a handle on what their educational skills are, and then you need to determine how you can raise the level of that skill to meet your competition. And all the things we've talked about in terms of controlling cost, competition, utilities, someone has to learn how to control this. Someone has to learn how to make the product. But education, I think now is, from my standpoint, is a key ingredient in your workforce. It needs to be done quicker, faster, and better than everybody else, and a competitive edge comes through education.
So do you think that manufacturing as a whole hasn't done its due diligence in marketing to, you know, the Generation Y folks. It hasn't, you know, made its industry sexy enough for them to even go into those kind of jobs. Do you feel that's a fault of manufacturing?
We really don't create an environment where young people see that sort of a career as a possibility, and so so I don't place the fault there on the manufacturer per se. I think that we don't do a good enough job, and I think the more we keep saying there is no manufacturing, a kid thinking about what they want to do in school is going to think, well, why do I want to go into machining, or why do I want to go into sheet metal or whatever, because everything that I've been told since I was 5 is there are no jobs. That's a problem. How do you get young people to see, right? I mean, I know for a while I was going around Massachusetts evaluating technical high school machining programs, and I went to some places in the state where I saw what I consider to be the best machining programs anywhere in the state, only come to find out a year or two later that they were closed for lack of enrollment. And yet I knew right up the road there was somebody looking for a machinist and couldn't find that person. So there's an incredible disconnect. And things like this, I hope, are part of the way to sort of to get us back to that. Is when you have people aging out of that occupation and there's nobody coming along, that's gone. It's not going to just magically reappear.
I was talking to a machinist, the guy, a couple weeks ago, and he said he's astounded that young kids that he works with just come in and they don't have what he said everyone had 50 years ago, got through public schools. It just doesn't exist anymore out there. So there is an element here about continuing to invest in public education, especially, I think, I'm biased on this, math and quantitative skills.
The difficulty that we find is that a lot of the workforce development money has historically been misdirected to remediation, so that there is a sort of prolonged adolescence into adulthood, that people think that they can delay things like math learning. And one of my suggestions to the powers that be is that we kind of refocus the workforce development system so that we're actually doing workforce development that can compete globally in the 21st century marketplace, and not remediation.
If I were to pursue one thing at the federal level, what is it that you think is needed? What is it we could do to sort of foster that commitment? Because as you say, once you have the commitment, then decisions follow from there. If you don't have it, then you never frame it that way, and it leads to all the offshoring and outsourcing that we see.
Cost of health care affects every employer. And to the extent that we're going to keep giving quality health care but reduce the cost, and certainly at least reduce the rate of increase that we've been seeing, I think that would be an enormous competitive advantage in the U.S. compared to the other parts of the world. And in New England, I think utility cost is a second piece. So that energy policy and other activities in that area would assist every business that is represented here or in the area.
A lot of industries here were created by folks who weren't born here. Like the guys like Peter Rose, who came here 50 years ago, and Desh Japan, and those kind of guys. And the immigration policy just gets blanketed into basically not letting people in and da-da-da-da, but it's so generically dealt with, and I fear that we're not, people who are like the best and brightest who might be going to the universities here are not staying. And they're the job creators.
That you set up on the floor of the house a gigantic jar, and every time somebody says we don't make anything anymore, they have to put a $10 bill in the jar, and then you bring all the money back here for workforce development.
Okay, all right. So change the discussion here a little bit, yeah.
First, I'm going to suggest what you should not do, which is don't support any broad corporate tax cut. Doesn't work. And human capital investment, that sort of thing, but I don't think politically that's going to happen in the near future. If there are tax cuts, and I think there should be some, I think they should be oriented toward encouraging innovation, research, and development.
Any opportunities for entrepreneurial activities or grant funding, we really rely on those. So again, I would just say, if there could be created any funding opportunities, any RFPs that are related to innovation, education, workforce development,